talk about the Freebirds. They did believe they were justified in what they did.
Yes.
And I think that was the thing. The superstar thought he was justified. When he came to Atlanta, he thought he was justified. You know what? And the guys believed it. That was the thing. They believed what they were doing. You can tell the guys today, they don't particularly believe in what they're doing. The guys back there would believe in what they were doing, especially Superstar Wrestling 2. The reason they believed it because they would beat each other really bad during the match. I remember Wrestling 2 telling us, man, I had a hard time getting up the next day. Let's talk about the booker for just a second and how important the booker was in the process of either making the product great or making it not so great. And there has been a lot of, and sometimes, maybe not always the booker's fault. Maybe he didn't have the talent that he wanted, because every booker would bring their own talent in. It wasn't like if Jack is going down to Center, Alabama to book a place, and there's other talent there. Jack, you're going to bring your own guys. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah, because I have turned down a lot of opportunities simply because the promoter said, no, I've got guys. I don't need you to bring your guys. Without my guys, my booking abilities are so limited that it's not worth my time going down and doing it. So,
because when Bill Dundee was brought to Mid-South Wrestling, when he was brought at that time to Mid-South Wrestling, Jerry Jarrett said, listen, I'm going to give you the Rock and Roll Express. I'm going to send you the Midnight Express, Terry Taylor, a couple other guys. I think Buddy Landell, he may have already been there. I'm not for sure. But the people that he sent said, listen, you won't know what to do with them because you're only used to using big guys. So we need to be able to get them to be able to do something. So they brought Bill Dundee with them. And then Bill Dundee started bringing all his people, trying to get rid of, for a long time, he tried to get rid of the Junkyard Dog. And he was glad when he left because you couldn't do anything there. Any kind of heat you would get, everybody hired Junkyard Dog, JYD. So you couldn't get anyone else over because if Junkyard Dog didn't come out there to save someone, they were let down by it. They wanted to see Junkyard Dog be the big savior. And so he was glad when he left. But booking can get a little bit if you ain't careful. And we've seen it happen. Booking can get to where you do the same thing over and over and over again. And we've seen that before in professional wrestling. What gets me is finishers being used more than once in a match. Finishers is just a finisher. I agree with you, but that did start way back in the NWA. People would use their finishes as a high spot, and that should never be done. And other people would be using their finishes in the matches. I remember Scott Armstrong had the super kick, and the next thing you know, there'd be 3 other matches use the super kick as a high spot. So that was done. That is a booker's problem, and that somebody's got to do that. Israel said Ron Wright had his loaded boot. Yes, I remember that. Late Percy Pringle was also a great one for getting heat, not only as Pringle, but as it's went blank with me. What was his other gimmick there for Paul Bearer?
Paul Bearer. Yeah.
Hello, gentlemen. Kenneth Hopkins. Hello, Kenneth. Thank you for being over here.
Hey, Ken.
Let's see. Susan Renee talked about the thump. I believe that was that when we were talking about
JYD.
Junkyard Dog. Donovan Graham, J.C. Dykes, and his Yankees caused riots in the South. Not only was it the Yankees, but the Dominoes, the Infernos. My middle name is Dykes. I was named after J.C. Dykes. J.C. Dykes is the person who started my father in the wrestling business. My dad started in 1962. He was helping put up the ring with J.C. Dykes. A wrestler didn't show up. And so when he didn't show up, they needed a referee. Dad was there. He was not smart when he started. He did not know. They did not tell him anything about the wrestling business. He got in there and refereed. And from that point on, from 1962 at 14 years old until I think it was 1996, 33 years, my dad was in professional wrestling. And he spent a long time in it. And because Jimmy did get him started when I was born in 1970, he called me Brent Dykes West. So Jimmy Dykes, he was he had a bunch of stuff at one time we were supposed to go pick up, but we never picked up. There was actually a loaded boot and it was actually made. And there was a little piece that would go back and forth. Actually, when they would hit it, they actually had a loaded boot. And so he threw it in the garbage. We could have had that loaded boot.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hey, guys, and not everyone is a superstar. A finisher should end the match. William Riley, I agree with you. We'll go with one more. Get back to heel and baby faces. Nobody really can tell who your heels really are. They don't keep a good heel strong anymore. Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask this question because Mitch was talking about it. Is it possible with sponsors to get heat? Will they get mad if people really get mad today? Will the sponsors get mad at Vince?
I guess it depends on how far you push it. That's ironic that we're talking about this after what I watched last night. Do you remember the Clash of Champions when they filmed Terry Funk supposedly in the hospital in Alexandria, Louisiana, and he waved his finger at the crowd and said, "Don't you turn your dial off WTBS because I'm going to be there later tonight in the Clash." And he came out and put a plastic bag over Ric Flair's head, if you remember that, and tied it off. And they went to commercial, came back. The medics were down there like they were giving CPR to Ric Flair, trying to revive him and whatnot as the program went off. And on the next WCW, back then it was not WCW Saturday Night. It was still World Championship Wrestling, the program. But Terry Funk actually issued a brief apology during a promo and said something to the effect of, "Don't you kids ever do anything like I went too far. Don't do that." But I think you can still get away with it without absolutely going over the top. I think there's ways to do that. One popular way right now, and I'll say this, and I'll get out of the way for you guys, but one popular way right now to get heat seems to be to, you were talking a little bit ago about it. There's always a dive move in the WWE. There's always somebody jumping out on somebody else on the announce table or whatever. Almost every big pay-per-view now, they have somebody take a big, huge fall. In WrestleMania, it was Kevin Owens jumping off the sign. They've done it with Jeff Hardy numerous times. If you break anybody on top of anything, apparently that gets heat. I'm not really sure that you can get it in the old school way anymore. Without the advertising. That's a good question.
What do you think, Jack? Can
I don't know. Advertisers are fickle. If y'all remember when Daniel Bryan was first getting his push up there, what was that? Nexus, was that the group they had, I think? And he choked the ring announcer with his own tie. Mm-hmm. And sponsors went crazy. And Vince wound up firing him over. I mean, something that we would have done on every show was suddenly something you get fired over. And so
maybe they don't get the heat today because without the sponsors, they're not in business. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, and it kind of surprises me too that they've started using adult language on WWE now, which I'm not a fan of. I also understand I'm not the demographic they're looking for. But to me, if I were Snickers, I wouldn't be happy with that. No. Because honestly, adults are going to eat Snickers, but I still think kids are your target audience for some of those sponsors.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I don't know. That's me. Like I say though, I'm not the target audience. So
Tim Warner said, when I was an agent producer at WWE, I told some talent then that they couldn't have been in the business 20 years ago. There was times I met the wrestler I was working with in the ring. Couldn't talk about your match before. They looked at me like I had two heads. That was the art of the business. We found that. I found that, and I don't know how long ago it was now that I did a wrestling show, the last wrestling show I did. But they would look at you basically and say, just like Tim Horner said, we would tell them, say, listen, a guy was doing some kicks, and I went to him and I said, listen, just don't kick. Just don't do it. They look horrible. Don't do it. Well, everybody knows the wrestling business is work. And I'm thinking, But you know what? Everybody knows that Superman is too. But if you saw the lines on top of him when he was flying, you wouldn't want to go buy a ticket to see that. Yeah, I understand that, but I don't want to make a bad B movie. And I think what he's saying is true. They want to go through every move that they do. Well, if it's not working, then the fans is just going to sit there and they're going to start hurling boring. I don't care if you do 45,000 spots in that match. I don't care what you do. If you're not telling a story out there, Rocket Monroe set me down one time, and I thought I knew the wrestling business. I was a young kid. From 76 to so on, I knew about what was going on in the wrestling. I thought I knew until Rocket Monroe set me down and told me about the wrestling business. And that was one smart man. So why don't you listen to the older guys? They'll be able to teach you something. And then the next guy will teach you something else. And the next guy will teach you something else. So if you're a professional wrestler out there, listen, watch tapes, learn the wrestling business. Because if you'll learn it, it can be good to you. You can make some money at it. Yeah, one of the days you may get to the WWE. Now, you're going to have to work different when you get there because you're going to be told everything to do. From the time you step outside your motel room, you're going to be told what to do. Let's see some other people. Michael Shea Crosby said, Skandar Akbar with Kamala burning hacksaw in Mississippi. Yes, we were there. That got some great heat. James Meek said, it's not wrestling anymore, it's sports entertainment. I wish wrestling was like it when I was a kid. 10,000 people in the Memorial Auditorium in Chattanooga to see Randy Savage versus Dutch Mantel. I think that was at the UTC Arena, right? Was that where that was? Not the Memorial Auditorium. The Fargo's back to Nashville Fairgrounds, and also Nick Goulas back in the 70s. They would run on a Thursday, come right back on a Saturday, and run and sell out both shows. So wrestling was bigger back in the 70s and 80s, and maybe even in the 60s, because I think in the 60s when they used to run Thursdays, and Dad, we used to talk about that.